Hello, good welcome. Sorry, good afternoon, and welcome to today's T&D World webinar titled "Undergrounding Power Cable in Texas and California: Contractors Overcome Challenges and Achieve High Production," sponsored by PDI Squared and Conducts. I'm Jeff Postlewaite, Managing Editor of T&D World with Endeavor Business Media. To begin with, I just wanted to explain how you can participate in today's presentation. If you have any technical difficulties during the session, just submit your questions in the window below, and our technical experts will help you out. We do recommend that you disable any pop-up blocking software or extensions in your browser, as these things can cause some issues with the webinar player. And we do want your questions today. You do not have to wait until the Q&A session to follow. You can enter them at any time using the same questions window that I just mentioned. Feel free to send them in at any time. And also, please be aware that today's session is being recorded and will be available on the T&D World website within the next 24 hours, and we will send you an email when that is ready. So I would just like to turn it over to our moderator for today, Mr. Mike Beeler.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I appreciate that. Hi, my name is Mike Beeler. I'm the National Spokesperson for the Power Delivery Intelligence Initiative, and PDI Squared, as we like to say, is a group of contractors and consultants and cable manufacturers and equipment vendors that advocate for underground. We want planners and engineers and data scientists today to look at underground versus overhead and evaluate it on the total cost of ownership over the life of the asset. Well, one of those costs of ownership is construction. So we're excited today to be here with Contractors International. And Contractors is a company that manufactures equipment that is going to be used in underground construction. So as we look around at all the things that are going on in the industry, there's a lot of movement towards underground. We just had a huge hurricane down here in Florida, and the total cost of recovery for that hurricane from Florida Power and Light was $1 billion. It goes right into not the rate base, but the one-time expense that goes into what customers ultimately pay. So as we transition to the next slide, I want to introduce to you some of the people from Contractors that are going to talk to us today. They're going to give some more examples of that. Another great example, just saw today that CenterPoint Energy is real involved in their recovery and some of the things that they're doing with their regulators and with the powers that be in Texas, and how they're going to handle the massive outages that they've had twice this year. So we're going to move on to talk to our people from Contractors. And if you could advance that slide for me, Janine, I'd appreciate it. And from Contractors International today, we have three people that are going to join us. Jim Radis is the CEO. And I'm going to ask each of these gentlemen, as I say their name, to just say a brief word of introduction, and then we'll get to hear from them. So you're not going to see our pictures today. You're just going to hear our voices. So we got Jim Radis, Cole Herding, and Darren Fox. So Jim Radis, give us a brief word of introduction, if you would, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jim Radis. We're calling from beautiful Mankato, Minnesota, about an hour and a half south of the Twin Cities, and enjoying one of our last 80-degree days. We're actually looking. It's amazing.
Sorry to hear that, Jim.
Yeah, from Florida, of course, right. But we're active. Contractors International is active in undergrounding, and we're looking forward to sharing some actual situations with end users that we've seen nationwide.
Great. We're looking forward to it. Also with us today is Cole Herding. And Cole, give us a quick word of introduction and greeting, if you would, please.
Yeah, I'm Cole Herding. Thanks for having me. I've been with Contractors for about 4 years now. I'm the field service engineer and training coordinator here at Contractors, so I handle a lot of our customer service, equipment demos, as well as managing our Contractors University training program.
And you're really the subject matter expert, a degreed engineer, right?
That's right.
There you go.
And actually, Cole, I'm glad you mentioned Contractors University, because I think we're going to talk about some of the training that you guys do with that university as well. So also, you don't see a smiling face here, but Darren Fox is going to chat with us today as well. Andy Kime will be there as a subject matter expert, but Darren, you're going to talk a little bit today. Let's hear a word of greeting from you so we can recognize your voice, if you would, please.
Hello, guys. This is Darren Fox, Contractors International Technical Sales Rep. I'm from the Golden State, out of Southern California, and I cover pretty much the western states for Contractors International. My title is technical sales rep, but I'm basically, in layman's terms, a field guy.
You're out there where all that growth in the West is going. So exciting place to be. Okay, Jim Radis, well, back to you, and your team are going to give us a little bit of, you're going to start with an overview of some of the outages that we've seen in the industry. So, Jim, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Mike. What we really want to do today is to provide a little insight into undergrounding as a trend in the power delivery industry. We want to also provide some specific detail regarding equipment and job site considerations for pulling conductor underground, and then review some actual projects. So while this type of work is being done around the country, there are areas that are driving undergrounding projects. And here's one, the Gulf Coast, specifically Florida. You know, they just recently, and Mike, you know this, 2 major hurricanes, you had Helene and Milton, large scale destruction and devastation with tens of millions of people without power. But, you know, that's obviously not just Florida. You got Texas. And in Texas, they had Hurricane Beryl in July of this year. The thing is different about that is it wasn't just the wind and the rain and flooding, but it was extreme heat. And so you had millions really without power, sweltering, dying from the heat. And it's really become one of the major target areas for underground efforts. So that's what's exciting about what's going on down on the Gulf Coast. If you look to the West Coast, there's a little different set of circumstances that's going on there. Wildfires are not only a threat to overhead lines, but overhead lines have been identified as the cause in some major wildfires, and that's impacted large utilities. When you look at some of the statistics here, over 6,700 wildfires in 2024, over 1 million acres burned, and almost 1,500 structures destroyed. So again, this is another target region for undergrounding projects. You can see there's a lot of undergrounding going on here, and some actions are actually taking place. You look in California, right, the CPUC, they've got some long-term programs for utilities. You got PG&E with over 10,000 miles of undergrounding programs going on. SoCal, SCE, has a program in place. And utilities and cities throughout California are looking to undergrounding just for these simple reasons. So you've seen the Gulf Coast with the weather, you've seen the fires in the West Coast, all targeting why we should be looking at bringing more of our lines underground. So with that.
Hey, Jim, and I'm just going to comment on that real briefly, too. We know at PG&E they're going to spend, I mean, their CEO came out, Patty Poppy came out and said, we're going to rebuild our company after bankruptcy. We're going to rebuild our company from the underground up, a little bit of a play on words. We're going to spend $15 to $30 billion on that 10,000-mile program, and that's just about 10% of their program. And I would mention one other city in California, just for the fun of it, is Anaheim. Anaheim, about 35 years ago, decided they were going to go underground, and they've undergrounded almost 80% of their distribution system, because really they take transmission voltage from Edison, and they're about 80% underground. And they've got some great numbers now that talk about what it actually costs to operate and maintain. So when we talk about the total cost of ownership over the life of the asset, we can start to look at utilities like Anaheim to say, what has their experience been? So
yeah,
anyway,
and
just want to comment on that thing.
Yeah, something else we saw is that in some, particularly in Texas, some of the new residential areas are going underground. We'll be talking about that later. So that's good to see.
Absolutely.
So with that, the next chart, please. Pulling conductor 101. Let's take a look at some of the basics for installing conductor underground, and I'm going to turn over to Cole to go through some of the equipment considerations for putting that cable underground. Cole?
Yep, thanks, Jim. Here I have listed some of the basic installation equipment you are likely to see on a job site, from lubricant to the cable puller itself. So again, looking through this list, each of these products play an important role in ensuring a successful install, and I'll touch on a little bit of these as we go further. So here are the basic steps in which I will cover for underground cable installation, starting with gathering all job specs and details prior to the install, to selecting the proper equipment and setting up the equipment, and then probably and most importantly, proofing the duct.
Hey, Cole, I want to comment on something. I think that we really need to make an emphasis as planners and engineers in this industry now, as we're not building our grandfather's distribution system anymore. We're building the 21st century distribution system of specifications. We cannot use specifications for things like cable pulling, for example. Can't use specs that were written in the 50s and 60s and 70s. We've got to look at the advancements in technology, the advancements in equipment, the advancements in lubricants and such, and get more out of it. And that's the job of the engineer, specifically the engineer. I won't even say the standards engineer. I'll say the engineer in charge of the job, probably the civil, maybe the electrical. And they've got to really take a look at those specifications. So I'm just going to get on that high horse for a moment. Back to you, Cole.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so it is important to gather as much detail and specifications of the job prior to the install as possible. The more information you can gather before entering the job site, the less surprises you're going to have. So here are listed some of the basic specs that you can try to find to best prepare yourself for that installation. Each of these are going to help you determine what equipment you're going to need and kind of overall help you strategize a plan for that installation. So first off here, I have a quick formula you may use to provide a ballpark estimate of the tension loads you may see for an upcoming job. So again, looking at that formula, to find the tension, you can use the length of your run, and then you'll multiply that by the weight of your cable per foot, and multiplying by 2 to the number of 90-degree bends you have, and then lastly multiplying all of that by the coefficient of friction. So you can see kind of down below there's an example there for an 800-foot run with a cable weighing 2 pounds per foot with 3 90-degree bends in that run. It's going to come out to be about 6,400 pounds. And just below that, you can see that same formula without lube. So you can see the great importance that lube takes in ensuring a successful installation or greatly reducing those tensions.
So the abstract factor there in that formula is the coefficient of friction, and you show the difference with lubrication and without lubrication, which basically speaks to the coefficient of friction. So it's really important that we know and understand that and decide going into the project whether we're going to be using lubrication and not whether we're going to, we're going to specify that we're going to use it one way or the other, I would suggest.
Right. Yep. And so next, based off that previous calculation, you can see this Blue Ox cable puller would be fully capable of pulling, of doing that pull coming in at 8,500 pounds of pull force and 3,000 feet of rope preloaded on that machine. And then here, the next step is to actually install your rope. So pictured on this slide are some different types of rope that are often used. The top two being mule tape and polyline, the bottom being steel winch line and double braided rope. Those last two, the steel winch line and double braided rope, they're going to be more commonly used for the actual installation. But in most cases, light duty rope like the P-line or mule tape is blown in first, where then the larger heavy duty rope is pulled in with that lighter rope. So again, you just want to make sure that your rope that you're using is specifically designed for cable pulling. It's clean, dry, not kinked or knotted. And lastly, making sure that the rope you're using has a breaking strength of 3 times the rated load of the machine you're using. That's just for kind of a safety factor in ensuring that the rope isn't snapping and creating any dangerous hazards.
Cole, let me ask you a question about inspections. So when I worked at Tucson Electric, we had inspectors, company Tucson Electric Power inspectors in the field that were looking at civil installations like that. In most of the utilities you work with, are you finding that they've got an inspector or maybe a construction manager that's a contractor that's in the field making sure that the specifications aren't being met, making sure that the equipment's the right size for the pull safely to pull it, looking at the rope, and you just mentioned these characteristics about what the rope needs to be. Are you finding utility inspectors in the field that are looking at this kind of stuff?
Yeah, there should definitely be a protocol taking place where the inspection completed prior to each install, whether that's done themselves or I guess sourced out. But yeah, there should always be an inspection sheet that's completed beforehand. So here we have the winch line blower. In this case, using the winch line blower, the extra step of installing that lightweight rope first can be eliminated. So the winch line blower is paired with a heavy-duty rubber carrier to blow in the larger, heavier rope all in one shot. So it saves a lot of time in trying to blow in that lighter rope first, and then again pulling it in, pulling that larger rope in behind it. So next here is positioning the cable guides. This will likely vary between job sites as each site is a little bit different. But when selecting and positioning these guides, it's important to make sure that you have them set up in a way where the rope or cable is not rubbing on any sharp edges. It's creating the smoothest transition possible when entering and exiting the pipe. And also making sure that the cable makes one gradual single turn as it's coming in or out. So here, and it's a big one, I cannot stress enough the importance of proofing the conduit prior to the install of the cable. Taking the extra time to proof the duct can save you a lot of time and money in the long run. Proofing the duct also greatly increases the odds of a successful install as you are not entering the duct blindly. So kind of looking at the mandrels here, the most common I would say are the wire brush mandrels. You can also use aluminum or wooden test mandrel to prove joint integrity of the duct or test for out of roundness of the duct. Also there's a rubber duct swab, which works well for pre-lubing the duct. I know in some cases people like to pre-lube the duct as well as lube during the installation.
So what's the craziest thing you found in a duct when you ran your mandrel through it? I mean, you talk about dust and dirt. I mean, are you finding like critters or
dead
what are you finding in?
Animals, all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
Darren, you find anything down there out in the West Coast?
Absolutely. I've heard of rattlesnakes.
There you go. There you go. That tops it.
So another important tool that should always be used are swivels. Swivels allow the cable to turn and bend freely through the duct without pigtailing and causing any extra tension or unwanted binding of the cable. We also have lubricant. So lubricant is the key ingredient for a successful pull. It provides protection to the cable and equipment by reducing overall tensions. So here's another quick formula you can use to kind of help determine how much lubricant you're going to need for a specific install. So you're going to take the length of your run times either the inner diameter of the duct or outer diameter of the cable, and multiplying that by the coefficient of friction. So for this example up here, 500 feet with a 4-inch duct, you're going to need at least 3 gallons of lubricant. And I say at least because there's really no such thing as having too much lubricant for a pulling application.
So do you guys, is lubricant something that Conducts International provides, or is that strictly equipment?
We do not provide the lubricant ourselves, but we do have some recommendations.
Okay.
And then here is, while you're pulling, you always want some way of monitoring the tension of the pull. This is important to ensure you're not exceeding the limits and causing damage to the cable or equipment being used. This can be done through an ECB box, or in other words, an electronic control box. So pictured here is the blue ox, where it actually has an electronic set point. So you can adjust that limit, and if you were to exceed the limit of the cable, the machine's going to shut itself down or stall out rather than pull to the point where it's going to damage the cable or equipment. If you don't have a method of monitoring it with an ECB box, you can always use a breakaway swivel. So a breakaway swivel is just kind of more of a physical weak point in that pull. So it's going to physically break loose before the point where anything like the cable or equipment is damaged.
That's great. Thanks, Cole. There's some questions on there, I see. Mike? No? Okay. Well, thanks, Cole. Now that we've reviewed the equipment, let's go out west to Darren Fox. Again, I mentioned earlier, Darren is our West Coast Technical Service Representative. And let's take a look at some typical projects and job sites there. So, Darren, go ahead.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this one was actually one of my most memorable jobs. This was in lovely Northern California. It was up in Oroville. It was very unique due to the property lines and all the individual homeowners up there. We literally were pulling in or upgrading their power to their homes, coming right off the highway. Pulling 750s 3 at a time. We had a 2-aught ground with it as well. These runs were less than 1,350 feet. We had multiple runs going to the residences and off the highway. But yeah, this was one of my favorite jobs due to the area. And my goodness, everybody had some longhorn steer cows. I mean, the most beautiful canines, and let alone the contractor I was working with. It was just an awesome area to be in.
So Darren, you guys are, you're going 1,000 KCM cable. That's pretty good sized cable. Is that about the upper limit of what you guys pull, or?
That's typically what I'm pulling, yes, the 750s and 1000s. I haven't been on any bigger ones yet. And I've also, pulled in individual interducts into single bore conduits as well with the Blue Ox. This particular picture is, due to the articulation of the Blue Ox, I was able to get over a barbed wire fence and pulling about 75 feet away from the vault. So it was just an awesome setup, and we were able to get the cable.
No, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but yeah, the job site layout is a challenge in this particular case.
Absolutely. This is actually the same job up in Oroville. This was on the highway, going to the individual private properties, and these runs were a little shorter just to get them in, but everything went phenomenal. Also, Oroville, California. This is also pulling on the highway. These were about 1,000-foot runs. You can see we're actually using the pulling grips and swivels and everything. But yeah, it was phenomenal.
These are contract crews that are working for PG&E or SMUD or whoever the incumbent utility is up there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It was a co-op that I was dealing with, and yeah, they're tied in with both of them.
Okay. What you got here?
Nick, well, this is still Oroville, and it's just a vault close-up shot. We're pulling into 6-inch conduit. This is the cables coming out at the end of the run.
So are you on the job site, Darren, when you said you cover the West, you're the sales technical representative, so are you out there on jobs like this typically to make sure that the contractor is properly using the equipment or has any questions, or you share that job with Cole or in Cole's team, or how's that work?
Well, Cole is he's a little more technical than I am. He's usually at the mothership, if you will. I am definitely a field guy, and yes, I work individually with contractors, co-ops, municipalities, so on and so forth. But I basically train and familiarize people with our equipment.
Are you guys working on any developer-driven projects like big solar farms or things like that where you're trying to put in utility-grade or utility-scale solar or renewables?
Yeah, we are, Mike. Jim. We'll be talking about that later on, but yes, we are.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay.
Oh,
Great.
Vastly, that whole energy segment is just exploding.
Yes, it is.
Affirmative. All right,
And
this shot is.
Here's
Go ahead.
Idaho now. So
Yeah.
we talked about California. We got Texas. We got Florida. Now you've got Idaho got snuck in here.
Yeah, this was actually an in-house or in-facility. It was a milk processing plant, and they were upgrading all their power. So obviously, we're pulling from their mothership, if you will, over to these transformers, and we used the winch line blower, got our hard line in, and we're able to pull the cable back. This is actually the same shot. This is the cable coming out after a successful pull. This one was Paris, California, with another contractor that's down there. This was just a simple pull onto a housing tract that was just being built. But yeah, we used the winch line blower. Everything went well. It was a 450-foot pull. I forget the cable that came out, but yeah, it was a great job.
So I can't let Paris go by without saying you guys are Conducts International. Jim, are you doing work? Are you providing equipment to contractors and utilities around the world, or predominantly in North America?
Primarily North America. There was a time when the company did do much more outside the U.S., but we're concentrating right now in the U.S. market as it's exploding.
I don't know why you need to leave North America, frankly. There is so much work to be done.
Well, you're
here,
right. That's it. There is a lot, but undergrounding in all different countries, once they get to that sophistication, we're prepared to handle that. So,
yeah. A lot of countries are a little bit further along than we are on their undergrounding. A lot of the developed world. It's if you go to Western Europe, there's a lot of underground that you just don't see, compared to going to some of our older cities where you see quite a bit. Anyway, okay, Darren, next slide.
And as you know, the cities, that's the hardest part to get undergrounding, right? They seem to be doing it out in the suburbs and in the sticks, but it's really hard to get in the cities, that kind of compliance. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Go on, Darren.
Okay, this one was actually Mesa, Arizona, or actually it was Glendale, Arizona. My bad. I've been to many cities in Arizona. This was an MDU or multiple dwelling unit complex, an apartment complex, if you will. But yeah, I was out there with SRP, and we were just pulling in cable to all the individual pads. Also, Arizona, same project, and just pretty much the outcome of the cable coming out after we were done with a successful install. This one might have been, just going off of memory, gentlemen, it could have been one of the data centers, could have been a substation, but yeah, obviously another successful pull. This one was Facebook Data Center in Mesa, Arizona, working with a high-end contractor out there, demoed our Blue Ox. Everything went phenomenal, pulling in very big cables. I think there are 1,000s, 3 of them with the ground, going into 6-inch conduit multiple times. And,
I'll tell you, for everybody on the call, we're seeing a lot of data center activity. And it's due to the explosion of AI. AI is not going backwards. It's requiring more and more of this kind of solution. So this is a good example of that.
And those data centers, Jim, require a very high degree of resiliency, not just reliability that's measured in minutes, but resiliency, which is the ability to withstand these high impact but low probability events like hurricanes. And somebody asked about wildfires here in the audience and such. So these data centers are going to that cannot afford to ever be out. And so they really, at the end of the day, they've got to have a very, very resilient system. And in my book, that means underground. And then, Darren, I'm going to ask you another question here too. And I think you got a couple slides left here, but you said you got a lot of successful projects. What do you run into when something is a little bit more challenging, that doesn't run perfectly? I mean, what kinds of things do you see in that maybe new planners and engineers and data scientists that are kind of new to undergrounding? What might they, what kind of word of advice could you give them to look out for?
Well, I'll tell you, like my colleague Cole Herding said earlier, it is absolutely imperative that you prove the conduit. The majority of my failures are always because of the integrity of the conduit. Some guys like to cut corners and try to save time, and I'm like, gentlemen, you're not saving that much time. In the long run, it's going to cost you more, and every single time it literally does.
Great advice. Good. Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
And what do you got here?
This one is actually the Facebook data center too. It's the cable coming out after a successful pull, going from building to building. This one is actually a Quick Trip data center, a gas station of all places. I didn't realize that gas station needs so much data, but obviously we all, all the rewards that are going on now and everything. But this was actually the end of the pool too. Everything came out successfully. This is Idaho. This is actually in process of pulling the cable. I believe the next slide is actually going to show the success of it. There it is. So yeah, the cable's coming out. Everything went phenomenal. This is also the same Idaho job, milk processing plant. Again, end of a successful pull. You can see the swivel's already out. And obviously the conductors came out.
All right, Darren. Well, thanks, Darren. That's great.
Absolutely.
A lot of information. Well, thank you. So let's take a look at undergrounding projects on the Gulf Coast. There's really 4 situations occurring here. Undergrounding, which is surprising, is not as aggressive in Texas. We talked earlier, costs. There's hesitancy because of the concerns over the cost, which has been a little bit problematic. Published reports, as you can see, estimate about $50 billion it's going to cost just to go underground in Houston alone. And the long distances aren't helping in Texas, right? That's just going to increase the project expense. But as I mentioned earlier, the new residential development is going underground, and clearly wanting to please end users who have made this point of a better total cost of ownership. So at least in the residential areas, they're getting it. Maybe not in the cities right now, but nonetheless, residentially. But if you look at the next chart, and Mike, this fits into what you were talking about before. This is not your father's industry anymore, right? The new energy sector starting underground, right? They're starting to get into it with the solar and wind farms. They're putting infrastructure underground from the start now, so they're not adapting. They're actually speccing it in. You're looking at power cables. They're connecting different arrays and turbines, and they're being pulled into underground conduit. And mainline to grid is also being pulled underground. So this is becoming a really target vertical market for our organization. And then, of course, the process for pulling cable is really similar for solar and for wind. And really, the good thing is it's more straightforward job site layouts, and unlike what you saw there from Darren earlier. But there's significant pulling projects that are going on. For example, there's a 50,000 foot total feet, a singular solar farm that's going up, and I believe that's in Texas. And it's going to run, you can see, 1,000 to 2,000 feet in length, vault-to-vault, 8-inch diameter conduit. So it's heavier and larger cable going underground. It's big. So we only see this opportunity for undergrounding. It's only going to grow. And we're really been happy to share this information with you and hope it added some value to what we see as a growing business segment in undergrounding. And Conducts is expected to be a driver in this industry.
Well, good. Thank you very much. Okay, well, we've got some time for questions, and we have several in from the audience. So, audience, I appreciate your questions. Go ahead and send them in, and we will start getting to it slowly but surely. And Janine, if you could give us a slide with our contact information, that'd be a great start. So I would say that if you have additional questions afterwards and you want to get in touch with somebody from Conduct, you certainly can. And I'm going to give you the first question from the audience. And this is a question that said, hey, are we going to talk about transmission cables at all? And really not. The conducts, you guys make equipment for distribution. And you said, I think, Darren, you said that you went up to about 1,000 kc mil on your conductor size. So everything you guys are seeing is what, would I say, 46 kV or 34.5 kV and below? Darren, what do you think about that?
I say affirmative, as far as my experience at this time.
Yep. Okay. Jim, any other comments on that?
No, I mean, you got to go to the guys in the field. I'd ask Andy.
Hi, Andy with Conex. Yeah, I mean, it varies. You know, it's either really, really small or really, really big these days, especially out East Coast where things are compact and congested, it gets small. And then more out in the residential areas, it gets to that large cable, how much power you're going to need for substations and such.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, good, Andy. I knew we were going to be able to get you in there somewhere, so thanks for answering that. Okay, here's a question from the audience. This is from a municipality up in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm just going to read this question and see which one of you can jump on this, but it's got to do with the way that you latch onto the cable. It says you'll want to add cable pulling gear method, a Kellum grip versus a clamp on the conductor, plus what the pulling line is, such as a Spectra versus a steel versus a Manila Road, etc. Does that mean anything to let's say, any of you technical guys? Cole, does that mean anything to you, or Andy, about the method of grabbing onto the conductor itself, onto the cable
You
itself?
guys want me to take this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. In my experience, I've pulled both ways. On the individual conductors, there is competitors out there, and the way their pulling eyes are set up, our pulling eyes are reusable power pulling eyes, and literally the connection is so strong that you will literally break the wire before your connection breaks. With some of the competitors that we have, they will slip off the individual conductors. In those cases, we use a Kellum grip or a pulling grip, if you will. Bundle all the conductors together and go ahead and pull it that way.
Good. Thanks for answering that. Here's somebody who's commenting on calculations for pulling tension, and they wanted to know about the sidewall pressure on a cable pulling calculation. Is that something that you guys take a look at as well, or would recommend? Cole, is that something that you've got an opinion on about sidewall pressure on conduits when you're doing your calculations? Is that maybe even a limiting factor in some cases?
Yeah, so the overall pressure on the duct, I guess, would be more so correlated with the specifications of the duct itself. But yeah, just for the overall tension on the cable, that's going to be kind of based off of that, how many 90-degree bends or turns that are in that specific run.
Yeah, so those 90s, whether you're coming up on a riser or making a turn around a corner or something like that, that would bring sidewall pressure onto the conduits. And so that's something you'd want to take into consideration. Andy, this may be coming your direction. This has got a question with the degradation of lubricants. And the question is, does over like decades of life, like 30 years, that's just the question. In 30 years, could there be an issue with the lack of or degradation of lubricant when replacing the cable? So let's say you got to pull it out 30 years later and you don't have any lubricant left in the conduit. I would imagine you'd relubricate it, but what you have any comments on what the cable might be like 30 years later, and what if you need to do anything lubricating it, or if there's anything like pulling out the cable?
Yeah, good question. There's not a whole lot when it comes to pulling out cable that you can do. Lubricant does dry out over the years. But after so long, there's a lot of dirt and things that get in there as well. So just to consider, it's a different animal when it's coming out. You could see up to those, depending on size, of course. Could be a lot easier. Not a lot to break it free other than, feathering the cable, trying to get it to break loose per se, and then keep going. If it gets moving, you don't want to stop. So.
And you may, yeah, that's right. You may or may not be salvaging that cable. So it's,
right.
What condition it comes out in is probably not going to go into another conduit for the future. Here's another question from the audience. What cleaning solution would you recommend to remove residue from the cable after an overhead underground installation? So this, I don't know, is this something maybe that Cole, you want to think about? This is coming from, it looks like a contractor or maybe a consultant about cleaning solutions for cable, for residue on cable. Cole, you have an opinion on that?
This is Andy again.
Okay.
So anything that's not too abrasive, like simple greens, things that's good for environmental, if it's going to be seeping in the ground, that sort of thing. You're depending on the lube you got, so it's going to be water or silicone based. So anything that really breaks that up, you don't got to get too crazy with it.
Yeah, that's good advice to be environmentally sensitive to it too. Okay, here's a question about setup space, and probably Cole, I think we'll come your way with this question. How much room for setting up equipment is needed based on the applications that you showed on some of the various projects? So you need a large footprint out in the street or out in an area, or how much room do you think?
Really, it kind of depends on the equipment you're using, but I mean, with some of the conducts equipment, we have adjustable boom arms and whatnot that pivot back and forth as well as extend. So with the mix of all of that, I mean, you can really kind of achieve for example, in Darren's description of getting over that barbed wire fence and whatnot. Again, it kind of depends on the equipment you're using, and luckily with our equipment, we've been able to overcome a lot of those challenging tight spaces.
Yeah. Jim, I think this question is going to be good for you. A question from the audience says, we've seen in the past in North America a preference for overhead line connections. Do you see this trend of undergrounding lines slightly or strongly growing in the next years? If you see it growing, what's the major factor which is pushing this trend forward?
I would say
that in some of your opening remarks.
Yeah, I would say definitely stronger. I mean, I always think of the end users, right? So it's going to be the people in the municipalities and the residents. And I mean, they're just tired of having power out for long periods of time and being under distress. And it's going to come to the point where we talk about total cost of ownership. The total cost of ownership calculations got to be end user satisfaction. Okay. And more people are not happy with the situations they've got, whether it's the fires or the rain and the wind and the flooding. They need power. They're tired of having to restock their freezers and refrigerators and going without and not being able to get gas because the stations are all down. I mean, it's going to get to the point where undergrounding, I like to think, is going to be a major play for municipalities going forward. I just think people have seen it.
I think you're right.
Storms, Mike. I mean, look at just 2 or 3 storms in a row. You don't even have a chance to catch your breath, and another one's hitting you, right? So that's where it's a good question.
Yeah. Somebody's got a question about horizontal directional drilling and any considerations for HDD bores. So now what's that going to have? Let's see. Are you guys going to get involved in anything like that? Do you have any equipment that helps to do like a horizontal directional drill, or does that really is probably outside of what you cable pulling for a directional drill is the same as a conduit, I would imagine. Any comments on that? Have you pulled cables through directional drills that go under rivers or under highways or railroads?
So the equipment that we'd most likely be dealing with are our directional drilling swivels. So our swivels, they're double sealed and greasable to keep any contaminants out. And yeah, they've really proven themselves in the industry and are often the go-to. But that's probably the most we deal with for directional drilling.
Okay. Okay, here is I think we answered this. What are the different ways that a line is connected to the cable? I think we addressed that. What are the most installed voltage ratings in conductor cross sections that you're installing? And I think Darren, you talked about pretty wide range all the way up. You were doing 750 MCM all the way up to 1,000 KC mil cable, and then all the way down to essentially small distribution voltages that would even go into subdivisions. Is that an accurate portrayal of your range?
Absolutely, my friend. Absolutely.
Okay. Good. Here's another question from the audience. This one has to do with water getting inside of the conduits and any effects on the lubricant. So I don't know if you guys, you're not the lubricant guys, but Andy, do you want to comment on, if water gets into a conduit, maybe you're below the water table, which is very likely in a lot of cities across America. What do you think about that, if you want to comment on that, Andy?
Yeah, no problem. So it definitely does happen, especially with the higher water table contents. It's best to get as much water out as possible, using swabs or air of some sort to kind of clean that out. But if it does get, your lubes do get diluted a little bit, it's still within that lubricantability. So you just kind of add a little extra in a sense.
And this is Cole. I'll kind of comment on that too. That's where the importance of proofing the duct again comes in. If you use one of those rubber duct swabs, that's a great method of getting any water out of the duct prior to the installation, or even pre-lubing the duct. You can use that rubber duct swab as well to kind of evenly spread and coat lubricant through the duct after using it to kind of squeegee that water out of there.
I'll say to the audience, thanks for all these questions. We're going to try to get through them, but we got a lot of questions. Keep them coming if you like. I'm going to go back to this about burn through on like 90-degree bends. This is a public power utility in the Pacific Northwest, and they go, how do you manage burn through caused by pulling line of the conduit? Pulling the line against the conduit, and you burn through the edge of the conduit when you're doing a bend, like a 90-degree, maybe up a riser, or a 90-degree around a corner, something like that. So that's not really probably what Conducts is concerned about, but I'll say, Darren, you've probably run into some instances where the contractor burns through, and what does the contractor typically do? I'd imagine that the inspector for the owner would, give a shout out on that. But have you run into that, Darren Fox?
I absolutely have, friends. I absolutely have. Unfortunately, the design of the job is imperative. When it comes to pulling cable, the more 90s you have, the more 45s you have, the harder you're going to pull. No matter what, your tensions keep increasing as you're pulling. It is imperative that you use either galvanized 90s or fiberglass 90s. PVC, Schedule 40, Schedule 80, you will burn through it after just a few 90s. It's just typical, and it's the nature of the beast. So I believe these jobs need to be engineered to have, decent material as far as 90s go. When that is done, we usually are always successful. I have absolutely burned through conduits. I mean, a steel winch line will go right through plastic. I have literally burned through it's shored up, it's concreted, everything. I've had all three materials come out on certain projects. And again, like Cole had said, you have to literally do the formula as far as your pulling tensions. And if you're doing the math and your pulling tensions are going to exceed what a machine can do or what the material can handle, you will have burn-throughs. So again, it's imperative that the job is designed correctly and have the correct 90s turns and whatnot as far as material goes.
Yeah, great point. And
I'll kind of comment on that too. I mean,
Sure, go ahead.
We've kind of noticed some of that, and we've taken some preventative measures. So like our steel winch line rope, it's actually an anti-twist rope, and the way it's woven, it's not really like a normal wound cable. It tends to have a less likelihood of actually burning through the duct because of the way it's woven. So rather than pigtailing within the pipe and creating extra tension, it kind of navigates through those bends and turns a little easier.
Good.
And then
Good. That's a great answer. I'd say one of the interesting things about PDI Squared, the Power Delivery Intelligence Initiative, is we have a lot of members that advocate for underground. Obviously, one of the members is Champion Fiberglass. We did a webinar with Champion Fiberglass that talked about the use and the application of fiberglass conduits. One of them is polywater, which we've done entire webinars based on lubricants. Cable manufacturers that make cable, equipment manufacturers that make trenching equipment. And so it's really, really cool to have you guys from Conducts on today. Here's a last question, Jim, before we go into some concluding remarks from you guys at Conducts International. But people are talking, there's a number of questions from our audience, and you guys in the audience did a great job, and thank you very much for your questions today, about transmission. And I think I kind of alluded to this earlier. I think we're so busy right now doing underground distribution, but what do you see in the transmission market? Let's just say 69 to 138 kV class transmission. Are you guys getting involved in that at all, or you're probably limited by cable size? But just comment on transmission in general and undergrounding transmission, if you would, Jim Radis, please.
Well, I mean, that's there's a lot in that question, right?
There is a lot in that question.
I mean, I guess the broad answer would be is that we're looking at all the available products that are going into the various markets. And, you know, right now with undergrounding just exploding, you know, our attention has been towards that category and segment right now. And just trying to keep up with that alone is keeping us pretty busy. There's no shortage for activities when it comes to that. The transmission side's a little bit different for us, and you know, but it's something we need to continue to keep on the forefront. But it's this underground part that we're really trying to focus in on. I don't know if that answered your question, but that, yeah.
Yeah, I think in general with transmission, I think we're going to see more and more 69 and 138 kV class transmission because the total cost of ownership of that is coming down. I think there are going to be other things when we go up to 230 or 345. You know, that is expensive to underground, but you know, I remember having a project manager tell me one time, she basically said, you guys will build this line where I can get it permitted. And if you can't get a permit to build overhead, you're going to build it underground. That's just the way it is. So there are some big, interesting, challenging underground HV and EHV DC, AC and DC lines that are planned out across North America that are pretty exciting. Okay, so let's go to a conclusion from each of you guys. And Andy, I'm going to ask you to start because you were able to chime in here. You're the subject matter expert from Conducts, and we appreciate you being on the call today. Well, Andy, and then Darren, and then Cole, and then Jim, you can give us the concluding thoughts. But Andy, a concluding thought, if you've got one, and take it away.
Sure. Well, I mean, we're in a good direction as far as the country goes. It's trying to put this stuff underground. I just feel like we're kind of spending money over and over every year, replacing what we put in last year. So I hope this is a good direction for everybody. You know, it's really picking up out west, and I hope to see it out Midwest more so than what it is, and then definitely out East Coast is really picking up. So it's all good news, and I can't wait to be a part of that.
Yeah, that's interesting, Andy. I think you nailed it. I think out west and on the East Coast, we see a lot more undergrounding, especially in the Southeast and especially in California. But it seems like the Midwest is a little bit slower, but that's common in our industry. So, Darren Fox, give us a final thought. I know you guys like to talk about the capacity that you have for making product, for helping contractors and utilities get out there. You've got great inventory now. You could ship if you needed to, but you could build for the first or second quarter next year. So give us a couple of concluding thoughts, if you would, please.
Sure. First and foremost, I'd like to say definitely visit our website. As Jim Radis had mentioned earlier, it is phenomenal. We have upgraded it. It's a brand new one. Lots of information on there. I'm very proud to be part of Conducts International. I have a decades-long history with Conducts International. I used to be in distribution at an underground utility distributor for 31 years. And, that's where my relationship with Conduct started. I'd like to thank PDI Squared, of course, and of course everybody for their time.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Darren. Appreciate it. Hey, Cole, I know you're involved in Condex University. You're the guy that's going to go out in the field and you're going to help train and coordinate this. You've got this brand new website that Darren just mentioned. So tell us a little bit about Condex University and some of the classes and the training that you can do not only in person but on site, and then give us a concluding remark, if you would, please.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm always happy to help train however I can. You can always go ahead and register for our classes at our facility through our website there under the Conducts University tab. Right now, the training's all in person at our facility. We can always try to work something out and come to you if it works out that way. But also most excitingly, we are coming out with an online training platform here soon. So that way you can access any training through the online portal as needed. And so we're pretty excited to be continuing with that.
That actually is exciting because as we bring more men and women into the industry, because of the demand for underground in particular, they're going to need to be trained. And so having people like you that are part of the industry out there helping to train is important. Jim Radis, you put together a great team here. You're the CEO of Conducts International. It's a great time to be in this industry. Give us some concluding remarks, if you would, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. No, this has been fun, and I can't reiterate the fact that we got capacity, inventory, and we train. So, we can take care of it all for you. Again, I'd like to thank PDI Squared and everyone who is listening today and for being on and participating in our webinar. It is a great time to be in this industry. More to come, more exciting things from Conducts, and have a great day and stay safe.
Well, we value you as members at Conducts International, and so on behalf of the Power Delivery Intelligence Initiative, my name is Mike Beeler, and we really appreciate you listening in today. This is a high-value webinar. It'll be recorded, and you can go back and listen to the archived webinar. And I think Jeff from T&D World Magazine, as he wraps it up here, will tell you how that can happen. Jeff, back to you.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you to all of our speakers today. That is all the time that we have. So on behalf of T&D World, I'd like to thank everyone for your contributions to this discussion and this presentation today. Thank you to PDI Square and Conducts for sponsoring today's webinar, helping us bring it to you, and thank you to all of you for joining. I hope you have a great rest of your day.